You don't have to look far to find out what time it is. It's on our watches, our phones, TVs, computers. It's in towns, shops, train stations, schools, airports. We live our entire lives to the minute, and so it's incredibly important to have it close by at all times. But how do we as a species know what the time is? How do we know that our phone is right, that the clock in the station isn't completely off? We're about to find out. Although it might seem like it, the concept of time isn't an entirely artificial construct. Even without our phones and watches, we know roughly what time it is. It seems at first that this is simply a case of being able to see where the sun is in the sky, but it actually goes much deeper than that. Almost all living things, including plants and microbes, are built with a biological clock. Whether you're a human, a mushroom, or a fruit fly, you have a biological clock. Multiple, in fact. Almost every organ has its own clock, all controlled by the master clock in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, located within the hypothalamus. The SCN houses about 20,000 neurons, which command period and cryptochrome genes around the body to produce proteins and hormones that control alertness, eating habits, body temperature, and sleepiness. How does the SCN know to time all these things? Via input from the eyes. Blue light from the daytime sky inhibits the production of melatonin, a hormone that makes you drowsy. That's why smartphone screens go yellowy at night, so as not to trick the SCN into withholding sleep. This chemical reaction to daylight and the stages our bodies go through day to day is called the circadian rhythm. So what happens if you're kept in complete darkness for days at a time? It turns out the body clock is pretty good at keeping time off-grid, so to speak, but not perfect. For every 24-hour period that passes, it will drift by about half an hour. Once daylight returns, it takes the body around 2 days to catch up. That's a feeling we call jet lag. It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Before we had artificial light, working in the dark was nonsensical. We would rise later and work into the evening until the light was gone again. You might find waking up for work difficult and fall into a natural pattern of getting up later and staying up later when you have time off. That's your body clock in action. What about in the Arctic Circle, where days and nights can last a season? Blackout blinds to keep the sun out and artificial sunlight, called happy lamps, to bring it back in again. It's no coincidence depression is higher in places like Svalbard when the sun sets for the last time in 100 days. Indigenous animals have even developed a hypersensitivity to changes in light and temperature to regulate their body clocks, with some species of Arctic reindeer appearing to halt their circadian rhythm altogether, although scientists aren't exactly sure how. So with the circadian rhythm controlling our body clocks, we can take a pretty good guess to the nearest hour. But what about minutes, seconds, and beyond? If you want to support my channel, I'd be thrilled if you checked out one of my novels, linked in the description. Thanks very much. Time in its finer resolutions, like seconds, minutes, and even hours, is a relatively recent thing. Towards the end of the Paleolithic era, a brief spell that started 3.3 million years ago that's also known as the Stone Age, it appears that humans weren't using the sun to derive time, but the moon instead. The moon in 1 year completes 12 cycles, which is how many cultures came to the same conclusion of having a 12-month calendar. This isn't true of every corner of the world, however, with the astronomically based Mayan calendar featuring an extra 6 months. It makes sense to measure time seasonally so as to prepare for the changing climate, and with the dependability of the moon, small communities could survive. But as those communities got bigger and organizing them became harder, it was clear a more detailed measurement of time was needed. Around 3,500 years ago, the ancient Egyptians figured out that they could use the sun to cast a thin shadow across a scale, which could be divided into 10 uniform sections. Why 10? The Egyptians used a base 10 system for their numbering for the same reason many cultures did, because they have 10 fingers. In fact, you'll notice that many modern and ancient numbering systems use a symbol that looks like a single finger for the number 1. The ancient Egyptians then added another section for twilight at the beginning and the end of the day, and so the 12-hour day was created. To keep things simple, night was also split into 12 based on the positions of a star group observed in the sky, giving us a total of 24 hours. Between one day and the next, that was all fine, but across the seasons its accuracy, and indeed the length of a day, drifted. More consistency was needed, and so began the task to devise a method of regulating time that didn't rely on a source that wasn't consistent. The flow of water and sand was discovered to be a steady and reliable source of uniform timekeeping, so long as it was maintained, their use stretching all the way from ancient Egypt to the 1500s, as seafaring Portuguese relied upon a system of 18 hourglasses to keep tally of their progress. It's no coincidence that the word clock is derived from the ancient word for bell, as both ship time and land time was communicated via a bell. As these systems became more accurate, it became possible to divide an hour into finer units. It's thanks to the ancient Babylonians that we ended up at 60, where the Egyptians used base 10, the Babylonians used base 60, presumably to make the cycle of seasons, which they believe lasted exactly 360 days, easier to calculate. It's not just modern minutes and seconds that draw from this system, but degrees as well. With the world becoming more interconnected, a singular time system has since been adopted, although a decimal system has been attempted several times. During the French Revolution, the French Republican calendar was invented with a day consisting of 10 hours, each with 100 minutes, and each of those with 100 seconds. But it didn't catch on. Then, in 1998, Swatch attempted to introduce its own decimal system called Internet Time, where each day was divided into 1,000 beats, each the equivalent of 1 minute and 26.4 seconds. That also didn't catch on. With ever-improving technology, greater and greater division of time has become possible. Mechanical escapements, first introduced in the 11th century, progressed from the use of weights to springs to force the physical motion of a rotating indicator called a hand at a constant rate. The beat of these mechanisms, characterized by the way they locked and unlocked to release a periodic and uniform amount of motion into the hand, determined their accuracy. Some beat 5 times per second, then 8, 10, and with the 1916 Hoyer micrograph, 100 times per second. The mechanical escapement prepared to make way for quartz from as early as the 1920s, which achieved the same goal of splitting time into discrete, accurate fragments, but in an altogether different and more accurate way. The piezoelectric effect, when passing a current through a piece of quartz crystal, causes it to vibrate 32,768 times per second, yielding accuracy, especially when thermocompensated, many times greater than mechanical, losing just a few seconds every year. But as this accuracy increased, it gave way to a new problem. How is 1 second defined exactly? What appeared to be constants turned out to be variable, like the Earth's rotation, which slows by 1.4 milliseconds every century. This problem didn't just affect time, it also affected other base measures defined by the International System of Units: distance, mass, current, temperature, amount of substance, and luminous intensity. For instance, a kilogram has been defined since 1795 as the mass of 1 litre of water, which was added as a physical reference to the standard in the form of a platinum iridium cylinder in 1899. That object was the single thing on Earth that defined exactly what a kilo was. The increasing ability to measure more and more accurate masses, however, highlighted that the mass of the cylinder wasn't constant, handling and environmental conditions adding and removing matter at the molecular level. And so in 2019, 4 of the base units, including mass, were redefined with a natural constant. For mass, that was by using the Planck constant, and 2 other constants, the meter and the second. The second had already been redefined as a natural constant in 1967 after the discovery that cesium-133 atoms change states exactly 9,192,631,770 times per second. And now, instead of 1/86,400th of a day, that's what a second is defined as. Solving this problem had greater consequences than perhaps you might imagine. This new Coordinated Universal Time, or UTC, based on the new standards adopted by the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, drifted from the previous Greenwich Mean Time standards that were kept in check with what were now known to be variable celestial references. GMT was still used on ships that relied upon the stars to navigate, before a satellite navigation system was in place, which would deviate from UTC by a second every few years. It was decided that UTC would add an additional second to compensate. And since the universe is irregular, UTC must compensate so as not to drift off over the years, requiring the addition of a leap second ad hoc. When a leap second was added in 2015, however, websites including LinkedIn crashed and Qantas Airways' booking system failed. Since the drift is minor, it's since been proposed that from 2035, the leap second is replaced by a less regular leap minute every 50 years or so. And so today we rely upon a network of interconnected atomic clocks around the world, operated by national metrology institutes and integrated by the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, to give us the measure of time we all reference to within a second every 100 million years. But the problem is far from solved, because with even finer resolution in time comes a whole new mystery: time dilation. In 1971, 4 airliners each took an atomic clock and flew around the world twice, once east and once west. The clocks on board the planes were consistently out of sync with the references on the ground. This was not a surprise. It had been predicted by Albert Einstein in his theories of relativity and proved once and for all that time was not a constant. Relative speed and proximity to gravitational mass fundamentally changes time. This is why satellites providing GPS locations must be updated by 38 microseconds per day. They lose 7 because of the enormous speed required to stay in orbit, and gain 45 because of the difference in proximity to Earth's gravitational mass. Without this adjustment, the accuracy of a GPS would be out by 10 kilometers in a single day. Already, the International Bureau of Weights and Measures is looking to supersede the standards set by the cesium-133 atom with a new type of timekeeper called the optical clock. With over 100,000 times the accuracy, an optical clock pairs lasers with elements like strontium to produce a far more precise and stable measure. Why? Most recently, it was used to measure the difference in time dilation between 2 chronographs placed just a millimeter apart. The increased accuracy will enable self-driving cars to navigate to within centimeters from a satellite signal. It could rapidly increase the volume of data it's possible to send. It will help scientists detect dark matter, which is believed to make up over 5 times more of the universe than the matter we can see. So it turns out that, really, we still don't quite know what the time is. We've got it down to a very small discrepancy, and every time we shrink it down even further, more of the universe begins to reveal itself. So next time you take a look at the time on your watch, take a moment to pause and think about the journey it's taken to getting here, and the possibilities that might come next. Thanks for watching.